Traffic and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. A programming note. Vice President J.D. Vance will host the Charlie Kirk Show from 11 to 1 p.m. today to honor his friend Charlie Kirk. VP Vance hosting Charlie Kirk Show on these airwaves 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. So you're fully apprised. Okay, so over the weekend we got a lot more details about the alleged assassin who murdered Charlie Kirk last week at that college campus in Utah. The Utah Governor Spencer Cox was making the rounds on the Sunday talkies. We find that the shooter is not cooperating with authorities, but his family and apparently his romantic partner are cooperating with authorities. His romantic partner is a dude who is, quote unquote, transitioning to a woman. That's the story there, who, according to family members, hated conservatives and Christians. We also know, according to family members, that the assassin was the one member of the family who was left. There were disagreements about politics within the family. This has all been reported. But the focus from the D.C. press corps, as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, has been on gaming culture and internet culture. This exchange, for example, between Kristen Welker and Spencer Cox on Meet the Press.
Governor, I want to ask you about something you said on Friday. You said, quote, there was a radicalization that happened in a fairly short amount of time. How was the suspect radicalized? How quickly did it happen?
Well, again, those are pieces of information that we're still gathering, trying to understand. We do know, and again, this has been well publicized, that this was a very normal young man, a very smart young man, 4.0 student, I think a 34 on the ACT, went to my alma mater, Utah State University, but was only there for a very short amount of time. I mean, dropped out after less than one semester, and it seemed to happen kind of after that, after he had moved back to the southern part of Utah. Clearly, there was a lot of gaming going on. Friends that have confirmed that there was kind of that deep, dark internet, the Reddit culture, and these other dark places of the internet where this person was going deep. And you saw that on the casings. I think I didn't have any idea what those inscriptions, many of those inscriptions even meant, but they are, they're certainly the memification that is happening in our society today.
Governor, I want to delve into some of the messaging that we have.
What about the trans partner? I mentioned this a couple times now, but I'll mention it again. I mean, we had Jim Fitzgerald on the show last week, criminal profiler, Unabomber case. And this is before the suspect was apprehended. So my guess, this is Jim Fitzgerald, my guess, probably trans or trans-related. You'll probably see a note or a manifesto. Pretty spot on. We've got inscriptions in bullet casings, not dissimilar to the Annunciation Church shooter in Minneapolis the other week. Spencer Cox, when he was on with Dana Bash, was asked about other writings that may have been posted to either this app Discord or in the gaming world that authorities have. He wouldn't confirm or deny that writings exist, and obviously he's not ready to release them. He's working off of what prosecutors suggest could be released into the public domain at this point. But he sort of indicated that it's likely some more of the assassin's writings will make their way into the charging documents forthcoming. For more on all this, we're pleased to be joined by Thomas Baker, retired FBI special agent and legal attaché, author of The Fall of the FBI, How a Once Great Agency Became a Threat to Democracy. Thomas Baker, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you this morning.
What's your sense, based on what we know, of the likely motivation for this assassin?
Well, I think you touched on some of it. There's more to come. There's no doubt he was motivated by hate, and the hate's available to people like me who are slightly disturbed. It's available everywhere. And the constant theming, you pointed out one thing, this specific little corner of our society, the trans world, but also the generalized hate propagated now by the left, by some very prominent people, persistently calling people like Charlie Kirk, and particularly the President Trump, Nazis, fascists, et cetera, which most of them, you have to realize, probably don't believe this. People who are in the Senate and Congress, they certainly don't believe that Trump is Hitler. They know enough history to know there's no comparison. But they keep saying that. And out there in our general society, there are some disturbed young people, often young men, who are very disturbed. I think if you're into trans, you're dealing with a mental illness to begin with. And they're provoked by this. And I'm not the first person that says this, and everybody's saying it now, and Governor Cox has alluded to this in a very calm fashion. So I think that's definitely part of the underlying motivation here.
Yeah, you don't blame, like, the proximate cause is not calling Charlie Kirk a fascist. The proximate cause is this guy who assassinated him. But that doesn't mean that words don't matter, that they don't have impact. There's a difference between understanding the power that words have and the repetition of words have, in terms of persuasion, while still saying, okay, but we live in a free society and you're allowed to speak your mind as long as it doesn't cross that line into conduct. But and I raise that for this reason, because you had Comcast issue this statement, expressing their condolences, the tragic loss. Our hearts are heavy. There's no place for violence and hate in our society. The coverage, and then that Matt Dowd got fired last week after his intemperate comments in the immediate wake of Charlie Kirk's death. They called it that coverage, Matt Dowd, was at odds with fostering civil dialogue and being willing to listen to points of view who have differing opinions. Except MSNBC, Comcast owns, has mentioned Trump and fascism 3,032 times in the last 3 years, 3.5 times more frequently than CNN, 4.5 times more frequently than Fox. So, on the one hand, it's all this, just like you're getting from the Dems, it's terrible that this violence occurred against a Nazi fascist person who's literally killing people. So they say in one breath, the thing that contradicts in the next breath.
Yes, there's a lot of insincerity on the part of these people. There's no question about it, and there's also a latent danger in here that they'll get back to their theme about, well, we need a federal terrorism law, and really they're talking about controlling speech. The fact is, when we're talking about Charlie Kirk, he was a world-class free speech advocate, and to do things that will control speech is not what we want to have happen. And also, factually, some of these comments, particularly regarding Charlie Kirk, that Charlie Kirk was spewing hate of some sort, are just not true. He was very temperate. He was very open-minded. He always welcomed debate and discussion.
The investigation. What's your assessment of how this was handled? There was initial 2 people brought into for questioning, 2 persons of interest. They were ultimately released. the job the FBI did in this instance is from your perch?
Well, from what I've seen, and that's been criticized, and probably the criticism is right as far as it goes. But it's almost Holman Jenkins in the Washington Post this weekend pointed out it's almost laughable. The New York Times made a big headline criticizing Kash Patel specifically by name, that he had made this announcement about actually two people who had been questioned and released. And they made a big deal about this. But of the FBI sins, the New York Times has been an aider and abetter in the past. The Times is the one was involved in all these leaks on the part of Comey, leaking false information, ultimately, linking Donald Trump to Russia. Holman Jenkins did a search, apparently, just like the search you referenced earlier that you did, and he found that there were 61 stories in the New York Times from 2017 to 2019 pointing out Donald Trump's links to Russia, which, of course, all based on the phony Steele dossier. That's incredible. And they're picking on this one thing. I think in the heat of the moment in a breaking case, sometimes mistakes are made. I think the old standby check, and double check applies here. Kash Patel shouldn't have announced that someone was arrested when he wasn't actually the guy. But then again, they would have forgiven others had Ray or Comey said, we've arrested somebody, and then said an hour later, well, it turns out he's not the guy, we let him go. I don't think there'd be as much noise made about it.
Yeah, I mean, you would think after high-profile instances like the anthrax case, like Richard Jewell, that you would want to make sure before you go public with, who you think the person is. But yeah, I hear you. Just I wanted to go back to something else, though. We had you on after the near assassination of President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, and talking about how the investigation into the attempted assassination attempt of President Reagan by John Hinckley was handled versus how that the investigation of the attempted assassination of Trump in 2024 was handled. And, I still find the information we have about what went down in Butler, Pennsylvania, woefully incomplete, don't you?
Yes, absolutely. And all of these questions, and someone who knows history like you do, and some of the history I lived, I do find it incomplete. I do find it a lot of questions left out there, and more information could be put out. But and there seems to be a lack of curiosity on the part of some corners in the press when you look how much has been written, for instance, about the Reagan assassination. One of the differences, the Reagan assassination was, and if you would bear with me for a minute, Dan, on this, the Reagan assassination by John Hinckley, the attempted assassination, was a lot like the assassination of RFK by Sirhan, in that the individual was apprehended immediately at the scene, and that closed off a lot of avenues of investigation, and the focus was right there, and everybody knew it. The Martin Luther King assassination was a lot more like this assassination of Charlie Kirk. Someone shot at him from a long distance with a rifle, and the rifle was left behind as evidence. In the Martin Luther King case, they were able to retrieve one fingerprint from the rifle, and after an extensive search, they identified the shooter, James Earl Ray, because James Earl Ray was a criminal who had been previously arrested, so his fingerprints were on file. We didn't have that video in Utah, and everybody in the neighborhood and then the family of the guy encouraging this young man to give himself up, we might not have ever found him, because I doubt if he was arrested earlier. So his fingerprints on the gun, or even his DNA on the rifle, would not have led us directly to a specific subject. So there's similarities, but a lot of people don't know their history. They don't look back at these other incidents, Martin Luther King being one. The Kennedy assassination was another one, a shot from a long distance. In that happenstance, a police officer was killed when they confronting somebody there in Dallas that turned out to be the shooter, Lee Harvey Oswald. So each of these cases are a little bit different, but then again, they're a lot alike in terms of the mechanics of the investigation. I think what's happening today, though, you have this radicalization, that's one word the governor used, of the youth. You saw it in the trans person killing those innocent little children at the Annunciation Catholic School. You saw it a year or so earlier in the shooting at the Christian school in Tennessee. And now you see it, I think, clearly with this individual shooting Charlie Kirk. That's a new problem. That's a new phenomenon. And it really goes to something really terribly deep in our culture.
The Thomas I hate to say his name, the Butler, Pennsylvania. I mean, he wasn't apprehended at the scene, but he was dead at the scene. And so what questions do you still have about Butler that we should get answers to? Because, as this prosecution moves forward, we're going to see if we get all our questions answered about the Charlie Kirk's assassination, but we still have a lot of unanswered questions that I mentioned about the attempted assassination of Trump and the murder of Corey Comparatore. So what questions do you have remaining about that?
Well, there are two areas of concern, and I don't even think they overlap. The one area of concern, which is the biggest and the most fundamental, and you've touched on it, is our culture, the radicalization of some youth through the trans and the other issues online. That's one issue. That's the big issue, really, and it's the issue that's very hard to get a grip on. The other issue that we clearly saw in the Butler case, and I don't think it happened in Utah at all, but I could be wrong, in the Butler case clearly was some tactical problems, police procedural problems with law enforcement. And in Butler, Pennsylvania, the Secret Service has already taken some hits for it, very well deserved. There's a lack of communication between the state and locals and the federal, in this case, the Secret Service, which was shocking because those problems we thought had been put behind us years ago.
Yeah, but I mean, but what about the shooter? Like, we have a very thin file on the shooter, at least in the public domain.
Okay, that's another problem. And what that does is clearly, and it raises suspicions in the public. What are they holding back from us? And we should know more about that individual.
Thomas Baker is a retired FBI special agent and legal attaché, author of The Fall of the FBI, How a Once Great Agency Became a Threat to Democracy. The Fall of the FBI is the book. Thomas Baker, retired FBI special agent. Thomas Baker, thanks for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. And he joined us on the Turkey.pro answer line.
It's news, opinion, insight. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Hello, this is Alistair Begg. In September of 2026, I'll be teaching the Bible as we cruise through the Norwegian fjords. I'd love for you to join me. Call 855-565-5519 or